Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Jared, and for the past year, the Russian Federation has been playing an active role in the development of the Ukraine Civil War by backing the pro-Russian separatists. So, can I get a raise of hands of any of you heard of the Ukraine Civil War? Maybe heard about it in the news, got some background about it? Go ahead and raise your hand. Okay. So, the Ukraine Civil War is a 9-month conflict between the Ukraine government forces and pro-Russian separatists who wish to secede and join the Russian Federation. Some background behind it: in I think it was more December of 2013, Ukraine leader Yanukovych was impeached following protests that he met with violent force. There was a significant amount of casualties as a result. The protests were over increasing economic ties with the West instead of Russia. This was a problem for Russia that feared NATO and the EU approaching on its borders. So, Russia has played an active role by, one, initiating the conflict by annexing the Crimean Peninsula, two, by illegally arming the separatist forces, three, by directly engaging from inside Russian borders the Ukrainian forces, and four, sending troops and paramilitaries to fight in Ukraine. So the first point, the Crimean annexation. I'm not sure if any of you heard about that in the news. It was a pretty big news piece because basically Russian forces, or the Russian Federation, had annexed a part of another sovereign country, the Crimean Peninsula. Initially, it had denied that it had done this and said that the vote that was done to from the people of Crimea to leave Ukraine and join the Russian Federation was strictly done by Crimeans themselves, that Russia had no involvement in this. The problem is, in April, President Putin of the Russian Federation admitted to Reuters that his troops had always been there and that they had played a key role in actually removing the Ukrainian forces that had bases there and in overseeing the vote. And the problem with this is that this encouraged pro-Russian separatists, who at this time were also counter-protesting, to actually take up to arms, and the Donetsk and Luhansk republics of the separatists basically started their own sovereign governments that they believed were the representation of the people they looked over, and they started engaging the Ukraine government forces. My second point, which had to do with the illegal arming by Russia, on June 15th, a Ukraine cargo jet was shot down, and on July 17th, Malaysian flight MH17 was shot down. The Dutch report by the Dutch investigators who were looking into the Malaysian flight have determined that based on the crash zone, which was in rebel-held land, and that the damage on the jet, that ground-to-air missile would have been required for this to have occurred. And specifically, they believe that a Russian-made Buk missile launcher was utilized in this attack. Of course, this is not something you can acquire in your average hardware store. This is something that can only be acquired by foreign government aid. And of course, the only other governments in the vicinity would be Russia. In addition to this, there's been an unregulated border between the eastern Ukraine, which is the rebel-held land, and Russia itself, which has allowed for the movement of supplies to go on unmonitored over this 100-mile stretch of land. And the other issue with this is that for this conflict has gone on for 9 months. With the amount of aid, weapons, and support that the Russian separatists have managed, this is only possible with a foreign government having aided them. And of course, with that border that Russia shares, this would make it a lot easier for them to move supplies, tanks, and any vehicles that the Russian separatists would need to take on the government forces. The third point is that Russia has been directly engaging Ukraine forces in order to support the Russian separatists. This is backed up by U.S. satellite images of Russian forces amassing on the Russian border including artillery vehicles, troops, and various jets. These same images show artillery firing and firing from the Russian borders into Ukraine. And this is verified because when the Russian vehicles, such as artillery, fire rockets, they leave a imprint in the ground from the fire that that basically shows that a vehicle had fired a rocket from there. And then from there they can pinpoint the trajectory of the rocket, and then it coincides with the damage that's then shown around Ukraine government bases. In addition to this, expert opinion has declared from experts around the world have stated that the formation and profile of the Ukrainian of the Russian forces and the way that they're amassing is not merely a training mission as they claim, but more in a defense or in preparing for an invasion of the Ukraine government. And the fourth point is that Russian servicemen, troops, and paramilitaries have been spotted in Ukraine, and they have also died over there. On November 12th, the OSCE, which is the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, they're basically a watchdog for rights and violations of international law in Europe. They reported over 1,000 military dressed troops entering and exiting the borders between Ukraine and Russia. In addition to this, the OSCE spotted trucks entering from Russia into Ukraine with the designation Gruz 200. In Russian military, that's a common acronym for troops. It's basically a hearse for troops that are killed in action. And they spotted this vehicle entering into Ukraine and then coming back several hours later. Another key point with this is that families of the Russian Russian soldiers who have died have come forward, and despite threats from Russian government saying that that they can spend jail time for doing so, they have stated that many of their loved ones have died over in fighting in Ukraine and that they're not able to go ahead and speak about it. And that is my presentation.
All right, Jared, the contents of the speech are nicely previewed. Everything is labeled and structured very clearly. You've got good data supporting the material in the presentation. I'm not sure how much controversy there is on this. I think we talked about this a little bit when you were putting this together. Except from the Russians' point of view, they can continue to deny and obfuscate what's going on. But I don't think anybody else feels like there's a lot of doubt that the Russians are behind a lot of what's going on there and that this is problematic. To me, the controversy, the element here that makes the most sense to be arguing about is what actions would be effective in responding to this. If there are no actions that are effective in responding to it, or if there is a substantial action that would be effectively responding to it, or if any of our actions that might be taken are too dangerous for us to respond to, that's, I think, where there's a little bit more controversy on the issue. The citation of information is pretty solid, although you're not always consistent about citing the sources. I think you should do that a little bit more. But you've got a lot of elements here that I think are, the inferences that you're drawing, that the Russians are involved in supporting this. You're building up the argument pretty well. Like I said, if you were at the UN making the argument that the Russians were behind this, I'm not sure that you would find much dispute on that. But I don't know. Maybe there is controversy on this a little bit more, and I think that if there is, you need to kind of give us a little bit more reason to listen to that. So my criticism is mostly, it's not to do with the structure of the speech or even mostly with the evidence in the speech. It has to do with whether or not this is where the argument is. I know there's a little bit of an argument on this, but it seems to me like the real disputes are whether or not our actions or responses are adequate or whether or not we have any choices in responding to this. That seems like it would maybe work a little bit more at building an argument. All right, thank you.